and body should be pure. Now there are two types of impurity. One is known as najasat ghaliza and one is called najasat khafifa. Two types of impurity. Najasat ghaliza, the heavy impurity. A few examples of the heavy impurity is that which exits the human body and necessitates wuzu. So for example, urine, stool, that if you go to the toilet your wuzu is broken, bleeding when it's flowing. This would include uh, blood of haze, meaning for women menstruation blood or istihada blood. It would also include a mouthful of vomit. It would also include, pus when it's flowing. So these five things which exit the human body, they are heavy impurity. Apart from this, the urine and stool of animals that cannot be eaten. Another example would be flowing blood from animals, of all animals. There are few exceptions, like for example a fish, and there are some other animals where if their flowing blood gets on your clothes, then it's not najasat ghaliza. But the general rule is flowing blood from animals, that will be ghaliza. Um, Alcohol. So alcohol is also najasat ghaliza. Birds which do not fly, the excretion of birds which do not fly. So from this is chickens, hens, goose, ducks. Their excretion will be ghaliza. So these will be classed as the heavy impurity, najasat ghaliza. And the second type of impurity is najasat khafifa, the light impurity. The light impurity, so example of this is urine of animals that can be eaten. That is najasat khafifa. So what is the ruling? If a person starts his namaz and on his clothes there is some impurity. So the answer is that it depends on whether that impurity is ghaliza or khafifa, heavy or light. If it is an heavy impurity, which I've already given the example, so for example, for now we'll just use the example of blood. If there was blood on your clothes, if it was less than a dirham, and I mentioned in the previous Tahara class what a dirham is. A dirham is 3 to 5 centimeters in diameter. So if the impurity was less than 3 to 5 centimeters in diameter, then reading namaz in that state will be permissible, although it will be makruh tanzihi, which means slightly disliked. There are two types of makruh. One is makruh tanzihi, slightly disliked. And number two, makruh tahrimi. Tahrimi comes from haram, meaning very close to being haram. Some have said it is haram. Makruh tahrimi. So when it's less than a dirham, so the blood is less than 3 to 5 centimeters in diameter, then the namaz will be valid if you read with those clothes on. Although if you knew about this before, you should remove it. But if you didn't, or you found out after you read salah, your namaz will still be valid. Number two, that najasat ghaliza was equivalent to the size of a dirham. So it was equivalent to 3 to 5 centimeters in diameter. Then the reading salah in such a state will be makruh tahrimi. And the ruling of reading namaz when in this, when something is makruh tahrimi, or you've done that something that is makruh tahrimi, is that namaz will have to be repeated within time. So the blood was equivalent to 3 to 5 centimeters, and you realized after you've read your namaz and there's still time now, there's still 43 minutes left for asr, it'll be wajib for you to repeat that salah again. But you've realized after asr time, you've realized at maghrib time, so that salah will be completed, although there will be some nuqs within that, meaning there'll be some emptiness and something void within that salah. And number three, if the impurity was more than 3 to 5 centimeters in diameter, then the ruling is that reading salah in such a state is impermissible, it is haram, the namaz will have to be repeated, whether that is in time or after time as well. So that is the ruling for najasat ghaliza. And number two, we said najasat khafifa, the light impurity. So what is the ruling for the light impurity? Is if it is equivalent to 1/4 of the limb that that impurity is on. So for example, the impurity, light impurity, is on your hands. If it is 1/4 of the hands or less, then fine. But if it's 1/4 or more, namaz will have to be repeated. So that's the hands, similarly the feet. And what about if it was on the clothes? Then 1/4 of the limb where the impurity is. So you'll consider 1/4 of the limb where the impurity is on. Some scholars within the Hanafi school, they've said 1/4 of the entire body. So you may hear this opinion as well, that 1/4 of the entire body. However, the more precautious opinion is 1/4 of the particular limb where the impurity is on. Now, we've mentioned this, but there's also